This courtroom hearing quickly becomes far more than a routine probable cause proceeding. From the very first moments, the judge signals that the testimony he has heard is unlike almost anything he has encountered in more than 2 decades on the bench. Multiple women describe years of fear, abuse, and trauma, and their emotional accounts leave a powerful impression on the court. But that's only the beginning. As the hearing unfolds, disturbing allegations, missing child questions, and a trail of contradictions begin to paint a much larger picture. The judge is about to explain why this case, in his view, goes far beyond the minimum standard needed to move forward. Stay with us, because the details revealed in this hearing become increasingly shocking with every passing minute.
Trying to make something that was horrible seem worse. I listened very closely when they couldn't answer something specifically. They said so, but they were very specific about what they went through. I've been doing this for 23, 24 years. And I'm always impressed, certainly, by witnesses. Their stories were hard to hear, certainly. But it had to be difficult for them to tell. And I certainly can't think of any more credible testimony that this court has heard and any more courageous testimony. Particularly, one of the things that was remarkable about their testimony, particularly with regard to Denise and Elizabeth, and you'll excuse me for using their first names, but everything they did and what they put up with at some point was really for the protection of their children. They were almost willing to sacrifice themselves for that. It was not a hard stretch for this court to figure out why Denise stayed, particularly after the point in time that Alyssa was born. She stayed in a lot of ways to try to protect Alyssa. She dealt with him because I think in her mind, and I think in terms of what she was saying, there was a great fear that he was going to do something. But if I keep in contact, if I appease him in some way, my child will be okay. Ms. Reese had the same thought process. And I don't, sometimes when you're up here hearing these cases, your mind can't sort of hold it all, but you leave certain things behind. But the testimony of Miss Reese when she was talking about being in that speeding car, not knowing what was going to happen, hoping and praying that the door wasn't going to open so she could extricate herself from that vehicle while it was moving. She knew she had to get out. And I won't forget her words. It's almost as if she wasn't really trying to save herself, but she was trying to send a message to her daughters that I had to let them know I tried to do something. And after going through all of that, Mr. Williams, I don't know that he deserves that title. Ends up hitting her in the head with a 2x4 as she's trying to get away.
At this point, the judge makes an important legal distinction. A probable cause hearing is not a full trial, and the court is not deciding guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The purpose is simply to determine whether enough evidence exists for the case to proceed. However, notice what the judge is emphasizing here. He believes the testimony presented goes well beyond that limited threshold. The emotional impact of the witnesses' stories, combined with the detailed descriptions of abuse, has clearly influenced the court's assessment of credibility. The judge is also addressing a key defense argument, that allegations of abuse alone do not automatically prove murder. That issue becomes central to what follows. The question now is whether the evidence connects the defendant's history of violence to the disappearance and presumed death of baby Alyssa.
Isn't necessarily abusive to children or whatever. Listening to this case as it was going on, I thought about that. And at the very beginning, that the things that Denise was describing and then ultimately Elizabeth were describing, the initial part of Miss Reese's testimony. Because he does all of these bad things, does that make him a murderer? Nothing at that point in the testimony had shown that he had necessarily done anything to a child. Then you hear the testimony of Elizabeth, or about Kimberly, excuse me, and what happened to her. And while I was trying to keep the date straight, and freely admit this, I had one question for the prosecutor because it didn't come up during the course of the testimony. But the end of questioning Ms. Reese, she looked back regarding testimony, and Detective Iverson knew, but he knew that one thing had not come out, and that was the age of the child. And then the question was asked, and I will be honest with you, I thought in my mind maybe she's 6'7", maybe she's somewhere. She's 2.5, and in somebody's care with broken bones, and that happens while that child, and he doesn't take the child to the hospital. He doesn't. He does nothing. It's not until Elizabeth got there, thank God.
This may be one of the most critical turning points in the hearing. The judge focuses on testimony involving a very young child who allegedly suffered serious injuries while in the defendant's care. Legally, this evidence is significant because it speaks to patterns of conduct, responsibility, and the defendant's treatment of vulnerable children. Emotionally, it's clear that this testimony had a major impact on the court. The judge openly discusses his reaction to learning the child's age and the circumstances surrounding those injuries. He is connecting multiple pieces of testimony and evaluating whether they form a larger narrative. What do you think? Is the judge drawing reasonable conclusions from the evidence presented, or is he placing too much weight on these prior allegations? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
Again, because in this court's mind, and based upon the evidence, that poor little baby didn't make it to September of that year. Others who were mothers who came into contact with the child, Elizabeth, and they were trying to get him to go away because their intent was to try to get that baby back to her mother. It didn't work out. He left with the baby. As there are these others looking to get back, others are beginning to ask questions about this baby. They see this baby. They see the baby at the hospital. They see the baby at the home. And they know, and he's giving a story about where Denise is that doesn't make any sense, doesn't fit in with where Denise actually was. And he's just making up stories, lying about why he has the baby. regrettably, we knew that it was going to have a tragic outcome because, as evidenced by his care of Kimberly, he doesn't have the patience to be able to deal with the child. Kimberly at 2.5 ends up with broken bones because she's crying. Can imagine what he must have thought of poor Alyssa. And then his unexplained trip. And I recall the testimony very clearly because he didn't have bags, he didn't have anything. He just said he had to go to Alabama. He just left. He had to go. And he took off. No baby that he had been sort of carting around, carrying around. He also then ultimately ends up back here and people begin to question him. And again, he can't keep his lie straight. And he, as his children testified to, his children that he had with Elizabeth testified to, when they ask, he just says, he gets agitated when they asked about Alyssa. He gets agitated and says he can't remember. Ask about the abuse, he can't remember. All of those horrible things he did, he just can't remember. But yeah, that wasn't good enough. The prosecutor's right, because at some point, he wants to stop being asked about it. So he feigns these various stories of implants in his chips in his head and some loss of memory from a car accident, which are not borne out by any medical records, visits to places in Alabama to deal with that frankly don't exist for the purposes of medical treatment. And all of those things, he just keeps saying. Then as I listen to Detective Iverson, when they start to get close to him, and he's no longer really, I think, beginning to fool people because now I'm dealing with police. And sometimes I don't want to talk to you, sometimes I don't want to do this. He decides his best bet and his way of sort of putting an end to the questioning is to just say, not only does he not know Alyssa or what happened to her, but he doesn't know his wife, his former wife. He doesn't know any of these people. And he thinks that's going to do it for him. Just regrettably for him, or at least as it sits here today, that didn't do it for him. Certainly I could go through, I rely upon all the testimony that the court heard. I could go through all of the issues that the prosecutor's gone through regarding the consciousness of guilt. That is overwhelming here in terms of what he did, his stories. He can't even keep consistent, as the prosecutor indicated, to one story. He's making it up. It's like he's throwing these things up against the wall to see what sticks, what people will buy. And that's what he was doing. The last person that he was with, that little baby Alyssa was with, was the defendant, who for right or for wrong reasons was in charge of her care. And then nobody sees Alyssa at some point. He then, outside of the consciousness of guilt of all of his lies and everything, he confesses.
With that ruling, the judge formally determines that the prosecution has presented sufficient evidence to move forward on the charge of open murder. Throughout his remarks, the court highlighted what it viewed as highly credible witness testimony, a pattern of abusive behavior, inconsistent explanations from the defendant, and statements that the judge interpreted as evidence of guilt. While this ruling does not determine final guilt or innocence, it means the case has cleared a major legal hurdle and will proceed to trial, where all evidence can be fully examined. The broader significance of this hearing lies in how courts evaluate witness credibility, circumstantial evidence, and patterns of behavior when direct evidence may be limited. What was the most powerful moment of this hearing for you? Do you agree with the judge's reasoning? If you found this case as shocking as we did, make sure to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping courtroom breakdowns.